Happy end of the 2025 season. We're giving the best of the year video a revamp.
How'd you like to be part of the team?
Where are the white women at?
Let's do this.
Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and on my channel I talk about entertainment media. I don't do worst of the year videos, but I did publish a sort of ranking video of books and films I read this year to talk about adaptations, so feel free to watch that if you haven't already. But now we are going to be talking about the best films of 2025. Now, it's typical to do a top 10 video and share a couple of honorable mentions that didn't make the cut, but I wanted to expand things. So let me explain. I don't want this to just be about the films that were released this year. I made the decision a while ago that I wanted to set aside more time to be able to go back and watch older films. Now, they don't have to be old in regards to their release date, but just anything that was released before the 2025 season. So this isn't just about the best of 2025's output, but also the best of my 2025 and the cinematic exploration that I did this year. If you are a regular viewer, you should already know my criteria, but in case you're new here, I will explain it. There are three main criteria I use when deciding which films to put in my top 10 of the year, and where they end up in the ranking. One is technical merit, so anything you would expect a film critic to judge. Acting, screenplay, directing, cinematography, and so on and so forth. Two is, how much do I enjoy the film? How does it make me feel? What sort of emotional response do I have to it? So these two reasons are essentially mind versus heart. And three is rewatchability. How inclined do I feel to rewatch this? How rewatchable is it for me? And what I like to go back and revisit in the film medium. The first section is going to have everything that I would like to recommend that was released before 2025 that I watched this year. Those will be presented in the sequential order of their release date. Then we will do the 2025 Honourable Mentions, which is just a miscellaneous assortment of films from this year that have something about them that I would like to put into the spotlight again, now that we are at the end of the year. And then finally, we will do the main event, which is the top 10 of 2025. So in total, you will be getting over 75 recommendations from me of things to watch, and you can choose any of these that you haven't seen that align with your preferences in genre, tone, premise, and so on and so forth. Another thing I debuted this year is a monthly series on Patreon where I go through everything I'm watching or reading for the first time, or maybe something I'm rewatching or rereading for the first time in a while, so I'm updating my impression of it. It's a good way for me to be able to expand on more of my thoughts on art that might not be as immediately current or trendy within the YouTube algorithm, so if you support me on there, on any of the paid tiers, you will get access to even more of my thoughts on the best and worst and everything in between of the works that I'm engaging with. Now let's go through the list. Beginning at the very beginning of the 1900s, and actually even the late 1800s, I was watching multiple films by Georges Méliès, who is a pioneer of film as an art form. They're mostly quite short, so you could easily watch many of them one after another, but I will just go ahead and pick the most famous and often referenced, Le Voyage dans la Lune. That's one of those films that even if you haven't seen it, you've definitely seen the imagery at some point. It was in Lisa Frankenstein. It, as well as Georges Méliès himself, were central to the Martin Scorsese film Hugo. It's really good to go far back and see the origins and foundation of the medium. Jumping ahead to the 1930s, we have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. What's so remarkable about this back and forth transformation between the two is how much of it is dependent on the makeup and the acting. Frederick March is incredible in this. Also, in general, I need a steady dose of older films to watch because the actors' faces actually move. I don't like to mention it every time it comes up because it feels like a vicious cycle of actors being self-conscious of their looks, so they get work done. And then we criticize actors for not being able to act properly because their faces are immobile from all the extra work, or they're not believable in period pieces, things like that. And then because of that, then they're self-conscious about their looks because we're talking about their looks. So I'm at the point now where I just quietly deduct points if the acting or believability is impacted by those things. And then I factor it into whether or not they're likely to end up in my top 10, and I recommend older films where that issue doesn't exist. And I get on with things. Frederick March, the anti-fascist, exceptionally skilled actor that you are, he had no business serving contorted face the way that he did, and aren't we fortunate for being able to watch him do all that he did in this film. The Walking Dead, this is unofficially the Frankenstein movie that actually lets Boris Karloff play the true range of that concept of a man having to exist as a resurrected being of sorts. A sci-fi gem that I would much rather watch over his Frankenstein movies that have severely dumbed down the pop culture impression of the creature. The Adventures of Robin Hood, a fun Technicolor romp, one of the famous Errol Flynn films. It's just a good time. Moving to the 1940s, The Picture of Dorian Gray. We can see early Angela Lansbury in a smaller role. That was a fun surprise. But the main surprise of this version is one that I won't say. Don't look up the film if you don't want to be spoiled, but there's, broadly speaking, a great atmosphere of dread and tension. I feel like I keep saying to my patrons that if you don't really think you can watch horror films because you find them to be too intense or graphic, try watching some of the older horror or horror-adjacent films because they're not overly scary or intense by modern standards, but they still get to dig into the ideas of the horror genre in compelling ways. Words and Music, this is a tribute film and loose biopic for Lawrence Hart that was made not long after he passed away. Given the Hays Code of it all, there are certain key details of his life that are omitted, but you do get to see loads of musical tributes. It's like a giant highlight reel of his works with icons of that time showcasing them, like Judy Garland, Lena Horne, and Gene Kelly. On to the 1950s, The Damned Don't Cry, a film noir starring Joan Crawford. Need I say more? A gripping tale of how futile it is for our protagonist to try to win in the nefarious, corrupt systems created by men with power. House of Wax, Divas, it's Vincent Price. You know he's going to serve, he does it every time. The drama, the death, the wax. Dial M for Murder. I don't normally enjoy much of what Hitchcock does. To put it politely, he has a weird energy about him. But this is a whodunit of sorts that he directed, and I did like it. It's got a well-constructed story that's fun for fans of the whodunit mystery sort of fiction. An Affair to Remember. I watched this because I've been following a very specific thread backwards into film history. Growing up, I saw How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, in which the main couple of Andy Anderson and Benjamin Barry go to the cinema on one of their dates, and they were watching Sleepless in Seattle, which drew heavy inspiration from what? An Affair to Remember, which, funnily enough, is a remake by this director of another film he made of the same name back in 1939, which I still haven't seen, but I would imagine I'll get to that at some point. Cary Grant, he's great in a love story. He's very likable, charming, and non-threatening on screen in a way that has aged very well. Now we take a brief trip to the 1960s. Earlier this year, I did the press junket for I Don't Understand You, which is a horror rom-com starring Nick Kroll and Andrew Rannells. During my interview session with those actors, Nick Kroll mentioned The Producers, the Mel Brooks film starring Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder. I had grown up watching the film adaptation of the stage musical, but I hadn't actually seen the 1967 film yet, which is the original. But Mel Brooks is so consistent in showing the audience a good time. I knew most of the story already because of how many times I have seen the 2005 film, but there are some noteworthy differences that were fun to discover. Black Panthers, the short documentary by Agnes Varda, mostly following the protests that took place in Oakland after the arrest of Huey P. Newton. She put together a beautiful portrait that's just letting them speak for themselves. On to the 1970s, we have another documentary, The Murder of Fred Hampton. This was something I watched after reading Jeffrey Hawes's book, which is a lot more detailed in the information it provides about the legal battle that followed, but what's especially powerful about the documentary is getting to watch Fred himself, in his own words, do what he did best. It was absolutely phenomenal to watch and a great way to follow up after reading that book. Sisters, this is a Brian De Palma film starring Margot Kidder. Try to go in knowing as little as possible. Don't even look up the film on Letterboxd because the less you know, the more you get to be surprised by what this is. Even avoid the movie poster if you can. This film is a neo-noir, and I will say nothing else because if I can put this on your radar if it wasn't already there, and you can watch this without being spoiled first, you are in for one hell of a ride. The Last of Sheila, it's a whodunit, so again, best left unspoiled, but while we're all left hoping for another Benoit Blanc whodunit to be greenlit, or if it's already greenlit, we're left waiting for them to actually make it, and you want another whodunit to watch, here you go. This is a good one. The Sting. I have 4 words for you. Paul Newman, Robert Redford. 2 of the best to do it, and they're together and they're doing a heist. There's a point earlier on in the film where Paul Newman is pulling one over on Robert Shaw, and he just gets this wicked grin and a twinkle in his eye because he knows how mad Robert Shaw is. Such fun. Seeing Paul and Robert get together and they're doing crime, it's a good time. The Wiz, I'm assuming most of you will already know about The Wiz because it's very famous, but if you didn't already know, this is a musical reimagining of The Wizard of Oz, except instead of starting in Kansas, we're starting in Harlem. And here's a fun bit of trivia if you didn't already know about the film beyond just seeing the poster somewhere or perhaps various clips of it floating around online. The screenwriter was Joel Schumacher, the diva that gave us Batman Forever. I love it. But this film is very famous, deservedly hyped. It's full of massive names, including but not limited to Diana Ross, Michael Jackson, Richard Pryor, Lena Horne. And watching this film is such an important reminder of what the movie musical is supposed to be. It's very rare that we get good ones these days that do the genre justice. And even the ones that are fun to watch, they're not given the budget needed to hire as many large ensembles to do musical numbers on the massive scale that you would want to see in a movie musical. Not every song in a movie musical needs to have a ton of dancers, but at least a few songs should. Dracula, specifically the one starring Frank Langella. This is an underrated Dracula adaptation. The sets, music, I mean, come on, it's a John Williams score. It's spooky. Now, I couldn't remember when I saw this for the first time, but when I was rewatching this year, there were certain moments where I went, I feel as though I saw this at some point as a child, and it must have creeped me out because this feels familiar in an unsettling way. On to the 1980s, we're starting with another whodunit, Evil Under the Sun. Technically, my first watch of this was at the end of 2024, but it was in the last couple of days of the year when I had already done my best of 2024 video, and I did not know at that point that I was going to change my end of the year video in this way, so I'm including this here. The same way I will include any 2025 films that I haven't been able to see yet in next year's video if I like them well enough to feel like they warrant that. One example of that would be The Testament of Anne Lee. It looks really good, but it has not been released where I'm at. And I'm a one-woman show when it comes to my channel, so I cannot just sit around and wait for the films to come to me in a timely manner. I have to work on the next videos on my to-do list or else they will not be finished on time. Evil Under the Sun is one of the Poirot film adaptations, and honestly, of the ones I've seen, this is probably my favorite. It's just a really good time for the whodunit girlies. Blood Simple, this is a neo-noir by the Coen brothers. It's also the film debut of Frances McDormand, though she doesn't come across like a newcomer or an amateur in any regard. This movie is like a Rube Goldberg machine. You have to just watch each and everything that sets off the next part of the larger chain reaction within the story. O Beijo da Mulher Aranha, this is the earlier 1985 film adaptation of the Kiss of the Spider Woman book. It's technically a Brazilian film, although it's in English, and neither of the two lead actors are Brazilian. But nonetheless, we're here and we are giving it its flowers. I watched it in preparation for the new musical film adaptation and it was compelling. Spaceballs. The timing of this rewatch felt very serendipitous because I think it was either during or just a couple of days after I was rewatching this that I saw the news about there being a Spaceballs 2 coming to the cinemas. And I'm so looking forward to that, not just because of my enjoyment of the first film, but because in general, it's a new Mel Brooks film on the big screen where his art belongs. I hope they will do a theatrical re-release of the first one in the lead up to the sequel. I would love to be able to watch this in theaters. RoboCop, who doesn't love a bit of Paul Verhoeven? There's no satire like Paul Verhoeven's satire. And on top of that, it's an anti-propaganda movie.
Gotta stop mythologizing the police, for Christ's sake. Come on.
Every time I rewatch this, I enjoy it. He called them out, and good for him. Mystic Pizza. We're here for the women, the sisters. Their love interests range from being annoying to unbearable, but we're not watching this for them. We watch it for these sisters and the familial bond they have with one another. The highs and lows of sisterhood. They live, John Carpenter doing anti-Reaganomics, anti-consumerism, science fiction, and you sprinkle that quintessentially 1980s camp style of delivery on all of it. What's not to like? And speaking of anti-propaganda, Do the Right Thing, one of Spike Lee's earliest films in his career, a well-known, highly regarded classic set in Brooklyn. It's really sad because of the subject matter, of course, but it's completely understandable that this film would become a classic. Throughout film history, you will find plenty of artists using their art to try to express things like sadness, grief, and anger over any number of socio-political injustices, and this is an example of that. I know my descriptions are getting quite short for these films, but I have a lot of them to get through and little time to finish. Thus, let's move on to the 1990s. One Man's War. This is a television drama about the Filartiga family and their fight for justice for the death of their son under the US-backed dictatorship in Paraguay. This was recommended to me by Brazilian viewers because Fernanda Torres is in the cast. She plays the older daughter of the family. Anthony Hopkins plays Dr. Filartiga. Being that it was made for a television broadcast, the budget and scale isn't as grandiose as you would expect to see in a theatrical film release of this time, but regardless, I found it to be a moving introduction to a story I wasn't previously familiar with. Of course, I already know about Operation Condor, but I didn't specifically know about the Filartiga family. Anthony Hopkins brings a dramatic, emotional weight to a really important story. Boys in the Hood, the classic feature film debut of the late great John Singleton. It's one of those films where you can feel how much love and empathy is bursting through the screen for the subject matter of what it's talking about, as well as for the characters that have been created to tell this story. I also really love that scene with Lawrence Fishburne's character, Furious, where he's speaking to people from the neighborhood and someone asks how he knows all of that, and someone else responds that Furious reads. You see what they're trying to tell you? What you need to know? It's that all of us need to read more. Practical Magic. It's a good time to rewatch this since we've got a sequel coming out next year, which I'm mostly looking forward to, although I am annoyed that they recast Evan Rachel Wood. But apart from the fact that Sandra Bullock's character ends up with a cop, gross. Ugh. Apart from that, I really enjoy this film because, similar to Mystic Pizza, it's really about the women in this family and the love they have for one another. Dogma! They did a theatrical re-release of this, so of course I went. It's a really fun, fantastical, comedic reimagining of things from Catholicism. And let's give a shout out to whomever of Kevin Smith's fans helped him out by giving him enough money to be able to buy this movie back from Harvey Weinstein. You will see a lot of Kevin Smith's usual collaborators in the cast, but also some bigger names that you might be surprised by if you haven't already seen this, if you weren't already familiar with the film. Now on to the 2000s, we have another film to re-release in the cinemas, so I went and saw it again on the big screen. Star Wars Episode 3: Revenge of the Sith. I loved watching this growing up, but it had been a few years since I last rewatched it, and seeing it again now, there were so many dimensions of the story that I had a new appreciation for. So ultimately, I stand firm in my stance that my love for Star Wars is more so me loving George Lucas as a filmmaker and as a storyteller. The way that the clones turn against the Jedi and start executing, that was a military coup. And it disturbed me in a whole other way now, specifically because of how much more history I've read and learned about. The Wind That Shakes the Barley, one of the best films. Period. Full stop. Irish excellence. Cillian Murphy, Liam Cunningham. If there's a movie that's going to call out injustice, Liam Cunningham will probably be there. And we love him for that. It's a fictional story, but it's set on the backdrop of real Irish history, more specifically the Irish War of Independence and the Irish Civil War that followed immediately thereafter. Phenomenal. I need to watch more Ken Loach films, and screenwriter Paul Laverty, I saw him popping up on my feed this year. You can look him up. See what he's all about. Speaking of Liam Cunningham, Hunger, the Steve McQueen film about Bobby Sands and the 1981 hunger strike. Harrowing, devastating, and an absolute must-watch. That long, uninterrupted take between Michael Fassbender and Liam Cunningham, how long was that? 17 minutes? Something like that? It has to be seen to be believed. On to the 2010s, The Wolfman. Every time I rewatch this, I'm so sad that this has been taken away from us. It's far too rare that a film with a $150 million budget is used to make something like this. A gothic horror film, a monster movie with a devastating father-son relationship. I suppose the closest thing we would have to that now is Guillermo Del Toro's Frankenstein, but most of the time, a budget like that is reserved exclusively for corporate slop that looks terrible. But The Wolfman 2010, we have sets, and costumes, carriages, it's a period piece. It's Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. It deserves far more love than it gets. Neds. This is a Scottish coming-of-age drama recommended to me by a friend who is also Scottish. It's a period piece about a boy who starts off being a good student, but gradually descends into delinquent behavior and activities. It's really sad on a character level, but also the way that it talks about the culture and policies that have failed the people at large, set them up for failure, not provided them with the resources to live good, fulfilling lives. It's an indictment of classism. It's sad, but it's really good. Neverending Man, Hayao Miyazaki. There are a few Miyazaki documentaries, but this is the one that has him humiliating those losers who are trying to pitch generative AI to him. I'm sure most of you have seen that clip go viral on social media at one point or another. This is where it's from. Now, that's not the only reason to watch this documentary, but if you only needed one reason to add it to your watch list, there you go. Portrait de la jeune fille en feu, also known as Portrait of a Lady on Fire. This is 2 hours of yearning. A lot of the people who watch my videos on a regular basis are romance girlies, so I really shouldn't have to give you any other reason besides that to watch this. It's romance, it's yearning. I remember how highly regarded this was when it came out, but I just hadn't gotten around to seeing it. There's never enough time to watch everything. There's always going to be something that you haven't gotten to yet, but Adèle Haenel was on my feed a lot this year because she joined one of the freedom flotillas that was trying to bring food and medicine to Gaza, though sadly they were illegally intercepted in international waters. By the way, every video I publish on here has donation links in the description box. So she was already on my mind, and then I saw that the film was available for me to stream, so the timing just aligned for me to finally watch it, and yes, it's excellent. It deserves the hype. Although I do get annoyed when a film that is so in your face with its romanticism, it's so well received and loved by the audience and critics, and yet we still have to complain endlessly to the people in charge because they drag their feet about greenlighting romantic fiction. The people want romance. Corporate bigwigs need to just get out of the way and let the romantic artists get to work. Moving on to the 2020s, Judas and the Black Messiah. Because this is a feature film, there's a lot of information that doesn't make it into the story, so if you want to start with this, that's absolutely fine, but just make sure that you follow up after the viewing with Jeffrey Hawes's book, as well as the 1971 documentary, because although the film is well made, there is so much more that you need to know about what happened here. Carmen, I'm sorry, a romance between Melissa Barrera and Paul Mescal? Absolutely 100% sign me up. I did a Patreon exclusive review of this, but we have 2 phenomenal actors doing a love story. There's music and dancing and so much more. Next, we have a film that I saw in the cinema, but I rewatched it so many times this year that it has now elevated to being a 5-star comfort rewatch.
A lady boss. I guess it really is the year that it is.
This movie is pure mayhem. It's so funny, absurd, satirical, and I love the deliberate overacting. It makes the line delivery even funnier. Also, Megan Thee Stallion has a musical number in this. Did you know that? Well, now you do. This is like a Parent Trap retelling, but much weirder and focusing on adult characters in a story told for an adult audience. The Last Showgirl, it didn't release in my cinemas in my area until this year, even though it was technically a 2024 release. The same thing goes for Ainda Estou Aqui. Both were excellent films, and I recommend them. Pamela Anderson should have been nominated far more than she was, and Fernanda Torres was devastating to watch. And the final recommendation for 2024, Say Nothing. This is a limited series I didn't know if I would be able to watch because it was only available on streaming, and I don't have that platform and I refuse to pay for it. But I happened to be at someone else's home, and they had it, so I watched it. And it was one of the best shows I think I've ever seen. It's about the Troubles, and it's based on the book, which I also read after watching the series. The limited series doesn't cover everything from the book, so if you don't have and won't get the streaming platform, I would recommend you simply read the book, and you could also watch the documentary ALYARZ, which doesn't cover quite as much information as the book or the Say Nothing series, but it does cover a lot of the material specifically about Dolores Price, so if you need some sort of a visual introduction before you embark on reading the book, that's an alternate option for you. Now let's speed run through the honorable mentions for 2025. O Agente Secreto, also known as The Secret Agent. This is a Brazilian film. It's a historical drama about the US-backed military dictatorship. And the one bit that I would recommend is that you need to be patient with this one because there were parts earlier on where I felt like there was information missing that I needed to know. And then I kept watching, and the information I felt needed to be there arrived. So just wait, stick with it, see it through to the end so that you can get the full story. This is not a movie made to just throw noisy things at you like you're a baby with keys being dangled in your face. You need to be patient and pay attention. That's the type of film this is. Also, Fatima, she's an icon, she's a legend, and she is the moment. You should have let her yell at that man for 20 minutes. I would have just sat there cackling and snacking and enjoying the show because he deserved every bit of what she said to him. Anemone, this is the feature film directorial debut of Ronan Day-Lewis, and I think that this film was judged very harshly on film social media. For a debut, it was good. I think people had very high expectations because it was the unretirement of Daniel Day-Lewis. He had 2 big monologues, which he delivered to perfection, just as you would expect him to do. It was a moving portrait of the way that trauma festers in men and gets passed down to the next generation. And the only way to make the necessary change is to stop running away and face it head on. Also, I will not apologize for enjoying the lingering shots of nature. Show me some green nature untouched by corporate deforestation, and I'm delighted. James Cameron would approve. Presents. I did a Patreon exclusive review of this. This is the Steven Soderbergh supernatural family drama, which is filmed from the point of view of a supernatural entity in the house. Try to see it unspoiled if you can. Also, the mother of the family is portrayed by Lucy Liu. I will say nothing else so that you have the option to watch it without me giving everything away. Editing me here, I'm going to interject with 2 additional films that I had included on my list, but when I was putting this video together, they somehow didn't get recorded, so I will mention them now. Locked and Drop. Both of these are thrillers with fairly simple premises, but they're acted well with good chemistry between their leads. They both keep their protagonists confined to a single location for the vast majority of the story. They're both down on their luck, but it's very easy for us to root for them. Locked also has some underrated eat the rich energy, and Drop is a nice addition to the good for her category. There are more films I could have included in the honorable mentions for both 2025 and any of the years before, but I wanted to stop somewhere that was close to a number that would be more neat to present, such as 50, 75, or 100. So this is where I ended up stopping my list. Depending on what you, the audience, think about this new format, perhaps I will go for something closer to 100 next year. The Roses. I saw this and then I read the book. It's about a married couple whose marriage is falling apart. I prefer the film because it's a dramedy. They put in a lot more humor than the source material, and in the film you get to see Olivia Colman being funny. If I can have a consistent dose of Olivia Colman making me laugh, I will be doing all right for myself. 100 Nights of Hero. This is a weird little esoteric gem. The target audience is romance girlies who like to read. It's not for everyone, but I had fun with it. Predator Badlands. I liked this more than I thought that I would. Deck of the Yautja. The world building of not just the Yautja, but the planet he lands on, the plants and the creatures, the anti-corporate commentary of it all. It gave me a found family, and again I say, Deck of the Yautja. This and Prey are undoubtedly my favorite films of this series, and I really hope we get to see a sequel. Blue Moon. This is for very sad fans of theater, but mostly musical theater, classic MGM musicals and whatnot. This is probably good to watch back to back with the previous film I mentioned about Lauren's heart, because this one is really probing more deeply into who he was as a person in a way that the previous film was not able to do because of the time that it was made and released. So with the first film, you're able to see a highlight reel of his best hits, of his work, of his art. And then in this new film, we get to deconstruct who he is as a character and have so much empathy in our hearts for all that he was. Plain Clothes, a sad but gripping drama. It was well worth watching just to see how it all ends. Tom Blythe had no business emotionally exploding like that, but he did it for us, and he's showing what he's capable of, and I was very impressed. 28 years later, if you missed it when it was out in cinemas, now is the time to catch up because we are mere weeks away from Nia DaCosta's sequel, and I just know that Jack O'Connell is going to be a menace and put on a show for us. I'm ready to watch. Den stygge stesøsteren, also known as The Ugly Stepsister. This is a slightly surreal body horror film, and it's a reimagining of the Cinderella story. It's twisted, demented, and yet somehow the body horror is not the most horrific aspect of the film. What is? Well, you'll have to watch and find out. This is something that I had no idea existed, and I would have missed it were it not for the fact that I check my local cinema listings on a very regular basis. It randomly got added. I looked up the basic premise, I watched a quick trailer, and I went, sure, let's go see what this is. It was horrific, and I recommend it. Urchin, this was Harris Dickinson's directorial debut, and he also wrote the film. It's a drama with a touch of surrealism, talking about the struggles of dealing with mental health and addiction problems, and the total failure of the policies in place to effectively help people in need. I was not aware of the film until Harris Dickinson showed up to Cannes to promote the film, and he was wearing a shirt calling out Suella Braverman, and I immediately added the film to my watch list. I think it played at my local cinema for all of 5 seconds, but I did manage to see it during that time, and it was great. A very impressive debut, and I hope he writes and directs even more films after this. The Monkey. I had a lot of fun with Osgood Perkins adding more humor in his adaptation of this short story. I love watching Tatiana Maslany act. Theo James was great at doing dark comedy. Oh Hi. This is simultaneously a rom-com and an anti-rom-com because the leads have great chemistry with each other in a way that's really fun to watch, but it's also genuinely funny in how it addresses the trials and tribulations of modern dating. See, I think one of the problems with Materialists is that it was being disingenuous in its marketing, so the audience who showed up felt misled. Oh Hi was honest about what it was doing, so I didn't feel misled when I sat down to watch it. And it was great fun. Definitely one of the underrated films of this year that I think more folks should be talking about. Jane Austen a gâché ma vie, also known as Jane Austen Wrecked My Life. This is a French rom-com, except it's French, so I need the romance girlies who watch me regularly to not expect a different tone than what this is going to be. It's French, so there is sadness and melancholy. That doesn't mean that there isn't hope and romance to be found. It's there. Our main girl works in a bookstore and she's struggling with her writing. She goes to a Jane Austen writing retreat in England, and maybe, just maybe, there is a man there with whom there will be romance. Dust Bunny, Brian Fuller's feature film debut at the cinema. I reviewed this very recently. It's so much fun, very underrated, not enough people are showing it love. It's a sweet, imaginative monster story about found family. Wake Up Dead Man, another film I just reviewed. It's my third place of the 3, but I still want 10 more Benoit Blanc whodunits. Please and thank you. Wallace and Gromit, Vengeance Most Foul. A new Wallace and Gromit film. They found a way to get the clay they needed to make a new one of these. An anti-AI movie made by real people, real artists. You can see their fingerprints on the clay at various points in this. A wonderful story. Definitely recommend. The Life of Chuck, my favorite Stephen King adaptation of this year, and it's probably the least talked about. Mike Flanagan is guaranteed to make you cry anytime he creates something, but the short story already had the type of premise and material to pull on your emotional heartstrings. This actually, surprisingly enough, isn't really a horror story. It's one that's best experienced for the first time unspoiled, so I will just leave it there. Kiss of the Spider-Woman, the new movie musical adaptation. This was made by people who actually understand the assignment. You do not release a new movie musical with a washed out color palette and hideous lighting. You serve a bold, high color saturation, you serve something that is reminiscent of the MGM Technicolor era, you make a lot out of a little. The fact that they accomplished as much as they did with this, with as small of a budget as they had, the bigger budget projects have no excuse. Jennifer Lopez, Diego Luna, Tonatiuh, flowers for all of you. Weapons. The experience of the loud audible gasping and groaning at certain memorable moments made everything so much more fun. The sense of humor that Zach Cregger wove into a horror story that can be an allegory for very serious topics like intergenerational trauma, addiction. It's very impressive. Barbarian was highly attention-grabbing, and Weapons must have, tripled that at least. Now the expectations for Zach Cregger are high, so we'll have to just wait and see how he follows up. But for now, I'm happy to celebrate all of the multifaceted strengths of this film. I wouldn't be surprised if this is in a fair few top 10 lists. It was in mine for quite a while, but there were so many powerhouse films and even some unexpected surprises that popped up in this final chapter of 2025. So it was definitely a competitive season as far as creating a top 10 list goes. But for me, I think it's all good. It's great for film fans, it's great for cinemas that we have so many fantastic new works to enjoy and share with other people. And my final honorable mention, I really thought that this was going to be in my top 10, so if I recommend nothing else in my honorable mentions for 2025, I have to recommend this. Bob Trevino Likes It. Barbie Ferreira, the actor that you are. The premise reads, Lily Trevino unexpectedly befriends an online stranger who shares her self-centered father's name. This new Bob Trevino's support could transform her life. This movie is basically the best case scenario of befriending a random stranger on social media. This was so healing to watch, but it will also definitely make you cry. I cannot fathom how this movie has had so little attention for how fantastic it was. Just watch it. Interestingly enough, I didn't realize until I was making this video that most of my highest ranked films of the year are ones where it's written and directed by the same person or people. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm unable to admire screenwriters who are first and foremost screenwriters, or directors who are directing something that they did not write themselves. But it does overlap with my preference for watching films that are made by artists and not by committees. For example, in the lead up to my top 10, what are the films I just listed? The Life of Chuck, written and directed by Mike Flanagan, although it's originally based on a short story by Stephen King. The new Kiss of the Spider Woman is written and directed by Bill Condon, although its first source material is the Argentinian novel by Manuel Puig. Weapons was written and directed by Zach Cregger, and Bob Trevino Likes It was written and directed by Tracy Lehman. Then, as we move into the main event, my top 10 films of 2025, all the films in my top 10 were directed by people who also wrote or co-wrote the film that they're directing. Number 10 is Sorry Baby, written by, directed by, and starring Eva Victor. Agnes feels stuck. Unlike her best friend Liddy, who's moved to New York and is now expecting a baby, Agnes still lives in the New England house they once shared as graduate students, now working as a professor at her alma mater. A bad thing happened to Agnes a few years ago, and since then, despite her best efforts, life hasn't gotten back on track. I was invited to attend a special screening of this where Eva Victor was present and she introduced the film, and then afterwards they did a conversation to talk about the film and the process of making it. I've published that here on my channel if you would like to learn more about that perspective of the film. But the way that this manages to weave a sense of humor so organically into a story that's about dealing with the aftermath of such a traumatic experience is impressive, as is the enormous empathy and found family quality of the film. I was glad to see that this has managed to pop up a bit here and there in the awards show cycle, not because I necessarily believe that such things are required to indicate the quality of a film, but simply because it means that this hasn't been forgotten. Among the honorable mentions I've presented, there were definitely a fair few that it feels as though they're quickly forgotten about. They never quite managed to grab the attention that the quality of the art should have earned. For Sorry Baby, it really shows a new, updated perspective on the subject matter. It isn't afraid to explore certain areas and handle them differently from how we usually observe in art about this. And it's also one of 2 films in my top 10 that have Naomi Ackie in one of the lead roles. That's a bit of a spoiler, but I don't care. I will say it early for the ones who know. Number 9 is Eternity, directed by David Frayne, who co-wrote the film with Pat Kunin. My regular viewers know that I love to see romance and fiction. I always want for there to be more rom-coms being made because far too few of them are greenlit. especially ones that will release in the cinemas. The premise reads, in an afterlife where souls have 1 week to decide where to spend eternity, Joan is faced with the impossible choice between the man she spent her life with and her first love, who died young and has waited decades for her to arrive. Not only do we have Elizabeth Olsen, Callum Turner, and Miles Teller in the main trio, we have Divine Joy Randolph and John Early as the delightfully funny afterlife coordinators. You know I love to see Divine Joy Randolph doing comedy because she's exceptionally skilled at that. There is a sadness baked into the premise given the morbidity of having a rom-com that mostly plays out in the afterlife, but nonetheless, there is plenty of humor and romanticism to be found here. It made me so happy to have some of my regulars returning in my comments to tell me that because I watched this at an early press screening, reviewed it, and gave it my recommendation, they then went and saw it at the cinema and ended up enjoying it. Although I would also like to have more rom-coms being greenlit in general and have some of those which deliver the more over-the-top, slapstick, physical comedy, the rom-coms with an extra serving of comedy within the title. I'm just glad we had at least one rom-com this year that was released in the cinemas and done to a high enough standard to make my top 10. That being said, I did say in my review that there was one nitpick I had about this and I would share it in my top 10 video. So if you don't want to know spoilers, skip ahead to number 8 on this list. I will put the timestamp on the screen so that you will know where to go. If you've seen Eternity, you should remember that there was a point where Luke said that among the roster of hookup partners he's had in the many decades of waiting for Joan to arrive, he has slept with a couple of men. And then, when he and Larry reach a point of hanging out, they get drunk together. And they cry together. The chemistry was chemistrying. So why exactly did we not have them do something? You know, smooch him, see if sparks fly. I'm not even saying that the film has to end with them being in a throuple, but the fact that you didn't even entertain the possibility of that is absurd. If you'd at least had them kiss, and then they just didn't really feel it, well then that's fine. Joan will only end up with one of them. But you set me up to think that that's where we were going, and then you didn't follow through on it. Try it out. You're already in the afterlife. Now is the time.
I'm not understanding what's so difficult about this. I want 2 boyfriends who love me and I love them, but they are also boyfriends and they love each other at the same time and love me. They kiss me, I kiss them, they kiss each other. What's not clicking?
Number 8 is Mickey 17, written and directed by Bong Joon Ho, based on Edward Ashton's book. I read the book first, I did a video on that, and then I saw the film adaptation and reviewed it. I enjoy different qualities about both versions. The book gets to go on more side tangents of sharing world-building details and lore. It's the sort of material that often gets removed or downsized in a film adaptation because a film has to accommodate a certain runtime and think about the pacing of the story in a different way than a book does. The film, however, has a lot more comedy and romanticism than the book, which are both qualities that I love to experience in a film. The premise reads, unlikely hero Mickey Barnes finds himself in the extraordinary circumstance of working for an employer who demands the ultimate commitment to the job, to die for a living. This is an anti-colonial story, it's anti-war, it's underrated, people moved on from it far too quickly, and I own it on physical media. Number 7 is Ne Zha 2, written and directed by Zhao Zi. This is the sequel to the 2019 film. After a catastrophic event leaves their bodies destroyed, Ne Zha and Ao Bing are granted a fragile second chance at life. As tensions rise between the dragon clans and the celestial forces, the two must undergo a series of perilous trials that will test their bond, challenge their identities, and decide the fate of both mortals and immortals. The second half of this movie is 5 stars. Not just 5 out of 5 stars, it's 7 out of 5 stars. The first half still overly indulges in a bit too much juvenile blue humor for my liking, but if you can get through that and reach the second half, it is an unbelievably epic fantasy. It's some of the best animation you've seen in ages. The battle that happens in the final part of the film, it was well worth the wait. It's an anti-imperialist movie, the love within Ne Zha's family, all of this is so phenomenally well done that it hardly feels real that this wasn't in my top 5. It was for most of the year, but this last quarter of 2025 was unbelievably competitive. Number 6 is Freaky Tales, written and directed by Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck. This is set in Oakland in 1987, and it consists of 4 loosely interconnected stories. We have a group of punks defending their turf against skinheads, a rap duo battling for hip-hop immortality, a wary henchman who gets a shot at redemption, and an NBA All-Star who must settle the score. This is a melting pot of people and genres. It's a joyful love letter to the Bay Area. Really, this is a big year for Oakland in particular. This film is also yet another opportunity for Jack Champion to make heart eyes at his love interest. This man went to the James Cameron School of Romance, so of course I was seated and ready to watch. I have this on physical media. It's the limited release with the packaging designed to look like a VHS tape. Now, in approaching my top 5, I want to first make it clear that all 5 of these are 5 stars. If you want to be pedantic over which film ended up where, you're wasting your breath, because again, these are all 5 stars. This isn't a 4.8 or 4.9 that I've rounded to a 5 when logging it on Letterboxd. These are 5 stars across the board. I had to put these films in an order because I would be bored by presenting a 5-way tie in a top 10. Number 5 is Rental Family, written and directed by Hikari. This is the only film in my top 10 that I don't have a video review published of on my channel, and the main reason for that is because this film came out of nowhere. I did not expect to love this as much as I did. I usually pick which films I'm going to review and when several weeks or months in advance. I have to plan in order to make sure I know what I need to do and when in order to ensure that I have my reviews ready to publish on time. When Rental Family was released, I was already busy working on other videos, so I just didn't have enough time available to add this to my to-do list. I do everything myself because I'm not a large channel with the means to outsource editing, so I can't review every new film that gets released. The premise of Rental Family is an American actor in Tokyo struggles to find purpose until he lands an unusual gig, working for a Japanese rental family agency, playing stand-in roles for strangers. As he immerses himself in his clients' worlds, he begins to form genuine bonds that blur the lines between performance and reality. Much of why I love this film is for reasons I cannot share. I'm Japanese. This was written and directed by a Japanese woman, and she's digging into a lot of things that deeply resonate with me on extremely personal levels, and I don't share personal details on social media. There is so much heart to this story. The connections that these characters form with one another feel so truthful and emotionally intimate. There is absolutely no other film that I've shared this year that I could say is similar to this. Whomever left the comment online saying about this that it's obvious this is a work of fiction because it's showing a white man who lives in Japan that's actually a really good person, you made me laugh a lot. Thank you for that. And thank you to Brendan Fraser for working so hard on your Japanese. He doesn't sound like a Japanese person, of course, but the character doesn't have to because that's not what the character is. Usually, when I hear Hollywood actors doing anything in Japanese for an acting gig, it's appallingly bad and it hurts my ears. He was actually okay. I didn't mind it. Henceforth, I'm going to pretend that Brendan Fraser won his Oscar for this movie instead, because this one's better. The entire cast of this was phenomenal. I don't expect to see them in all that many Hollywood gigs, let alone ones that actually give them material that is as good as what they played in this, but I will always have this to look back on. Number 4 is Hamnet, directed by Chloé Zhao, who also co-wrote the screenplay with Maggie O'Farrell, who is the author of the source material book. The book is one of the best works of fiction I read this entire year, and because I had read it beforehand, I knew this film was going to wreck me. The premise reads, the powerful story of love and loss that inspired the creation of Shakespeare's timeless masterpiece, Hamlet. I was not aware that there were people going to watch this, not knowing the most basic premise, which is that it's about the Shakespeare family. Now, I don't like to know too many spoilers before a first watch, unless it's something based on a book that I've already read. But come on. I had considered doing a reread of the Hamlet play, but I ran out of time. I am going to reread Hamnet, though. I'm on the waitlist for a library copy. I might just reread Hamlet at some point this upcoming year as well. I already know that Jessie Buckley is exactly who I thought she was. She was in Men, she was in Wicked Little Letters, which I mentioned in my top 10 video for last year, and The Bride was one of my highly anticipated films for 2025, and then they delayed the release to 2026. So when Hamnet arrived and I saw the trailer and I read the book, I knew she was going to do exactly what the character needed to do. And she did exactly that, and so much more. She's done Shakespeare at the Globe. She is completely qualified to be here. Theater is not about holding back. You are acting for the people in the back row. Maggie O'Farrell, Jessie Buckley, Paul Mescal serving one of the best books and film adaptation combinations of this year. That's proof of yet another year of Irish excellence being in the upper stratosphere of the film medium. Hamnet is about love, family, nature, and art. Sign me up for all of that. Actually, let me rant a bit more. How are people not knowing he's William Shakespeare when he was writing Romeo and Juliet very early on in the story? You didn't hear him reciting lines when he's falling in love with Agnes? But soft, what light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. That line delivery he was doing where he's practicing the iambic pentameter, yes, diva, you did that. Number 3 is Frankenstein, written and directed by Guillermo Del Toro, based on the Mary Shelley novel Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. Yet another example of one of the best books I've read this year and one of the best adaptations of the year. I'd read Frankenstein before, but I wanted to refresh myself on the material since it had been a while since I last read it. He keeps the essence of it largely the same, but he also infuses everything that is quintessentially Guillermo Del Toro into the material. Have any of you seen those clips of James Cameron and Guillermo del Toro on their respective press tours talking about each other as besties and creative collaborators where they will read each other's scripts and whatnot? I love that for them. But anyway, Frankenstein. This is one of several films that I watched very recently, and I reviewed them on here. I loved them, and now they're on this list, so I don't want to be redundant in saying everything I said what feels like all of 5 minutes ago. The performances, sets, the reworking of the source material to further emphasize the way that there's a very specific type of nefarious person who is more interested in creating life than they are in caring for that life after it's been created. Do we all remember when Bong Joon Ho won one of his Oscars and he quoted Martin Scorsese in his speech where he was stressing the importance of art expressing something personal? That's exactly what Guillermo del Toro has done here. That's also what the rest of my top 3 have done, drawing on personal things and sewing them into your art. I love Guillermo del Toro as a filmmaker, even if I don't love every film of his to the same degree. He does have his gothic signature, and Frankenstein is a phenomenally executed passion project. And his interview clips are fantastic. You just ask him about the absolute smallest detail, any detail, and he's going to have an extremely long, thoughtful answer that explains everything that went into that one small creative decision. It's incredible to see. Number 2 is Sinners, written and directed by Ryan Coogler. This was a phenomenon. Truly, it's a classic. It's not even 1 year old, and I'm telling you, this is a classic. I know it will be. I don't think I need to tell you the plot or the premise because everyone was showing up for this. There were people online saying they never go to the cinema anymore, but they were going to see this because of how enormous the hype was. This is going to be number 1 on a lot of film fans' lists, and they're correct. I know I put this at number 2, but this was my number 1 for basically the entire year until about a week and a half ago, and we will talk about that in a moment. Just wait. Like I said about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein, Sinners is an extremely personal work of art. You watch any number of Ryan Coogler's interviews, you will hear him talking about his late uncle, you will hear him talking about his family members who have inspired Smoke and Stack, and also similar to Guillermo del Toro in his approach to making Frankenstein, Ryan Coogler has done so much research to do a period piece. The attention to detail is something that I adore. Any and every detail into history of multiple different cultural and linguistic groups. We're digging into West African research into the Mississippi Delta Chinese, Irish history and immigration, research into the blues as a genre of music. The list is extremely long. Also, remember how I said earlier that it's a big year for Oakland? Well, I meant exactly that because you will hear him saying that in interviews. Do you know where I'm from? And then he answers his own question by saying, he's from Oakland. So that city's history is also going to shape his life experiences, his worldview, which in turn influences his art. I published 2 Sinners reviews on my channel, and even after doing those, it still felt like there were loads of other details that could still be dug into because that's the type of film that this is. It's a melting pot of genres and influences. I can already tell that this film will be one of those lightning rods, a major point of inspiration for generations to come. When you look into certain big-name directors, and we're talking about people who are all at least a decade or a few decades older than Ryan Coogler is, you tend to see a certain amount of overlap in films and filmmakers that those directors will name as influencing their own art and their desire to get into the world of filmmaking. It's very obvious to me that Sinners is going to be a film that loads of filmmakers whom we have not heard of yet because they haven't begun to pursue filmmaking yet or they haven't had their big breaks yet. They are going to name Sinners as a source of inspiration. I'm so glad to see many established Hollywood artists helping this film to campaign. If I was a member of a voting body for an award show, I would be voting for this across a lot of the major categories. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Song, those are the first three that come to mind, but if it wins in other categories, great. The way that I see it nowadays, award shows where I'm not a member of the voting body have nothing to do with me. I cast my vote here on my channel for whichever works of art I would like to receive more attention. That's why this video exists. Number 1, surprising absolutely no one that has watched my channel on even a semi-regular basis, is Avatar: Fire and Ash, directed and co-written by James Cameron alongside screenwriters Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver. But of course, we all know that these Avatar films, Pandora, the Na'vi, this is all an original idea from James Cameron. Listen, this has been my most anticipated film since the end of 2022, when Avatar: The Way of Water came out in cinemas. I love that film. I love the Avatar film series. I love a lot of James Cameron's filmmaking and storytelling, so it was always Fire and Ash's spot to lose when it came to the number 1 spot for 2025. If it had been released in 2024, as was the original plan before they pushed it back to 2025, it would have been the number 1 film of that year. I very recently published a review on here of Avatar: Fire and Ash. I may very well end up doing another video about the film during its theatrical run. I am very fixated on this film series, the story, world building, themes, characters, the fact that James Cameron has helped to push a lot of advancements in filmmaking and VFX technology as these films have been made. And whether you believe it or not, these films are very personal. He has been a climate activist and hardcore environmentalist since he was a teenager. That man is in his 70s. This is something near and dear to his heart, and he specifically came back to filmmaking to do Avatar: The Way of Water because he was hoping to strike an emotional chord in more people when it comes to environmentalism. And for me, it's been highly effective. My eating habits have shifted. I avoid plastic a lot more just everywhere post-2022 because I constantly worry about it poisoning the ocean and the wildlife that lives in the ocean. I could go on, and did in my Fire and Ash review, so I will spare my regular viewers from having to hear me incessantly repeat these same points. But I may very well do a follow-up video about the film if I decide to share additional thoughts after further rewatches at the cinema. The Avatar films are some of my favorite films of any year, and Fire and Ash is a fitting finale for what has been a truly fantastic year of new releases. I hope you're open to this expansion of the end of the year video and the way that I reworked the format because I really want to broaden the scope of the art I can recommend to those of you who care to hear what I think.